Guys, you gotta stop training like you're a bodybuilder on drugs. If you're natural and you're not seeing the gains that you want, you need to listen to this. So in this video, I'm gonna go over 3 common mistakes that natural lifters are always doing all the time. Many make these mistakes because they follow the advice that doesn't apply to them, usually from steroid users. Okay. So the stuff that I'm about to share applies to natural lifters. So if you're using the bodybuilding dope, then this doesn't apply to you, right? Unfortunately, the internet has an epidemic of fitness influencers on PEDs to look the way that they do. If they're extremely lean with abnormal muscular development, it smells super fishy to me. And if they got the old NPC IFBB alphabet soup after their name, then that's pretty much your answer. Listen, if you want gains without using drugs, then you should not follow the advice from the roided out drug influencers or coaches, because in most cases it's not applicable to you. So bottom line, naturals need to stop training like they're juiced. So instead, you need better advice that's relevant and useful to your situation, considering that you're not taking or planning to take the bodybuilding dope. So listen guys, gaining muscle, it's not easy, especially when you're tall and you're drug-free. I'm 6'2", so any of you guys over 6 foot, you know how difficult it is to look like you gain muscle. Now when we go hit the gym and we get an upper body pump, we look jacked, right? And it looks great. Wish we could have a perma pump, but when you're natty, it's not how it works. It's not reality. So that, goes away after about 20, 30 minutes and you whittle back down and you look small and then people look at you like, bro, you don't even lift, right? So that's the reality for naturals. We don't have this perma pump, and if you're over 6 foot, it's even worse, right? It looks like we haven't been putting any hard work in the gym. But that, of course, is not the reality, right? Many of us are putting in the hard work, and genetics, they play a massive role. So some of us have bodybuilding genetics, and many of us do not. But, we can always improve. We can always build upon what we have, right? It's just a more difficult road when you're natural and you have certain disadvantages, but it's fine. Like, we have a baseline and we build from there. So the first thing that we need to understand is that mechanical tension is the primary mechanism for growth. Now, mechanical tension is internal stress within the muscle when you push, pull, or hold any type of external resistance. So when this happens, it sends a direct signal to the muscle fibers to adapt and basically strengthen. So when muscles are loaded under resistance, they experience mechanical strain at the cellular and molecular level. And again, you like my artwork here? It's beautiful. Beautiful artwork, right? Now, this internal stress, when done right, it can trigger a stimulus that can hopefully create muscle growth. Now, we apply this tension by manipulating variables like load, intensity, volume, frequency, tempo, exercise selection, many different ways. But there are 3 common mistakes that naturals make when doing this. And that is what we're going to go over. So, problem number 1 is static load. Now, many lifters typically, they're not focused on strength and they don't track records. And it's those who are natural that suffer the most from this. So, what is the solution? It is progressive load. Progressive load is crucial for muscle growth because it forces the body to continually adapt to increased external tension. So by steadily increasing weight over time while being strict, your muscles experience a greater degree of internal mechanical tension. So this has to go up. Progressive load has to go up, right? That way we have an increase in mechanical tension within the muscle. Now, you need a system that implements progression through strength. This is extremely important when you're natural and not taking bodybuilding crack. Now, if you don't focus on a plan that gets you stronger, then your muscle growth will be suboptimal because getting stronger is directly tied to muscle growth, and this is especially true when you are clean. Now, it's important to qualify what this means because a lot of people think that it's just powerlifting repetitions, 1 to 5, singles, doubles, triples. That's not what we're talking about here. Okay, so I'm not referring to getting stronger in powerlifting repetition ranges. I am speaking directly about bodybuilding rep ranges. So anywhere from can be 6 all the way to 30. Okay. So bodybuilding repetition ranges, that's where we need to land. And probably the best range for this is 8 to 12. All right, it's not so high in reps that it's so fatiguing and you have this crazy burn, and it might even hinder you from getting to true failure or close to failure because the burn is just so great, right? And it's not so heavy where your joints are always taking a beating. Now, there's some utility for reps on the lower end and reps on the higher end, depending. But when I talk about progressive load, I am speaking about bodybuilding repetition ranges 8 to 12 being kind of the gold standard for this. So we're not talking about powerlifting rep ranges. So your program should have a progressive load element to it. But your strength progressions need to be tracked, audited, and interpreted over weeks and months because progression is not always linear. It's not how it works. And again, I have to mention this, that progressive load doesn't mean just CrossFit in your reps, getting the PR no matter what. Okay, so if your form is sloppy and you make a progression, that doesn't translate to greater internal mechanical tension on the muscle. All right, so your variables need to be standardized when you're tracking these load progressions. Okay, they don't have to be like perfect, but the biggest issue I see with load progressions is going to be sloppy form, more than anything. All right, so you might have a little bit faster speed, you might cut the range of motion a little bit shorter, as long as it's not, you go from full range to like quarter reps, and your range just keeps getting shorter and shorter and shorter with each progression. It's not what we're doing here. But the biggest issue I see is just sloppy form, right? They're trying to get the rep count with the increase in load, or sometimes same load but more reps, and your body just might not be ready yet. It hasn't adapted. So it has to adapt, and then you try to make that progression. And when you make that progression, it's going to be clean like it was the session prior. Okay, so we're not trying to get sloppy PRs here. Right? I just have to throw that caveat out there because that's the biggest issue with progressive load, and that's why everyone's so against progressive load. Like, that's it. It's progressive sloppy load. Everyone's against that, but we have to like make that distinction. Okay, so progressive load, progressive clean load is a good thing. Progressive sloppy load is a bad thing. All right, so when we talk about making progressions and implementing progressive load, we're not talking about slop progressive load. We're talking about clean progressive load. That's how we do it. All right, just so we are all very clear about this. But since mechanical tension is considered the primary driver of muscle growth based on the current research that we have, increasing load over time is regarded as a key strategy to enhance the stimulus and facilitate muscular growth. And I just recently got a paper published on this, so if anybody is interested, I will link it in the description. You can read it, but it talks about progressive load being a key factor in muscular growth, but particularly, like, especially for naturals, those who are drug-free. All right, it's a peer-reviewed paper. I think I have like 90 plus citations in it. It's awesome, right? Shameless plug, but if you're really interested in the literature side of it, then I recommend you go and you read that. It's a literature review. It's actually a position paper. So it counters high volume, right? Counters the high volume research and the high volume paradigm that's out there. And it puts the progressive load element for naturals in the limelight. So I recommend you go and read that. All right, so let's move on to the next problem here. Problem number 2. Bear with me while I erase some of the stuff. Problem number 2, low effort. Many people are not pushing that hard in their sets. This means that the stimulus for each repetition and each set isn't as good as it could be. So, what is the solution? Well, I'll tell you what the solution is. You just sit tight. It is high effort, my guy. High effort. Now, high effort reps are crucial for muscle growth because it ensures that you are recruiting the maximum number of muscle fibers. Now, the largest fibers that are growth responsive become fully activated the harder the repetition is. The repetition. That could be at the beginning, the middle, or the end, right? So there are 2 ways to tap into those fibers. You can CrossFit your reps and produce high force per repetition, or you can control your preceding repetitions and get close to muscular failure. I like to mix both. I don't go too fast, like what you see these IFBB pros doing in the no matter what. That's ballistic. But I don't go too slow either. And I like to get close to failure. I think this is the best approach. So for speed, we aren't going painfully slow on purpose, like super slow sets. So if any of you know anything about super slow, they do a 10-10 tempo, so 10 positive, 10 negative. So this was an offshoot from HIIT and Arthur Jones and what he was doing. Ken Hutchins developed this, and there's a whole set. It's just a sub-genre of HIIT, essentially. So they have specialized machines and specialized cams, but they literally go 10-10, that is the tempo. We're not going that slow, and actually, reps that are that slow, especially with conventional tools, machines with, they have cams that are not specialized for this, and or free weights, it actually reduces your effort per repetition, right? So you see a lot of super slow guys, I'm not gonna name anybody, but I've been seeing this lately, and they're using like dumbbells, and it's kind of funny. You know, you need, for that to work properly at all, you need specialized equipment. It's better to have specialized equipment, shall we say. But one of the issues with that going so slow is that if you go really slow on the positive, which is the harder part of the repetition, right? You're overcoming gravity. The negative in a traditional set, so not advanced techniques, but in a traditional set, the negative portion is the reprieve, right? So it's kind of the break. It's kind of like the chill part of the repetition. Because the positive, you're overcoming gravity. The negative, you're going with gravity. Of course, still resist, but it's still the negative portion of a traditional set is the easier part of the repetition. So you're literally going up 10 seconds or whatever, 8 seconds, whatever, if you do a variation of it, right? And then you're slowly coming down. At the beginning of your set, it's not really doing a whole lot for the muscles. It's just not, guys, okay? Now, towards the end of a set where you get close to failure, slower negatives, I love it. I'm on board. But at the beginning, when you're doing really slow positive and negatives on purpose, so volitional restriction of speed, you are literally reducing your your effort per repetition, sorry. So if you go very slow at the beginning and you're far away from failure, there's a reduction in effort per repetition until you get to the end, all right? So I don't see value in going this slow in the beginning, all right? Now, if you're forced, if you get to failure and you have to go slower, it's different. We'll talk about that here in a second. But I don't think doing a super slow protocol or variation of it is going to be the best choice here. Now, the flip side to that, going ballistically fast, like the CrossFitters, like the IFBB pros, don't IFBB pro your reps, guys, okay? Don't do that. If you go fast where it's ballistic, there's a lot of momentum and it offloads the muscles. So you still want a strong contraction from point A to point B where the muscles are still being loaded. That is really important, guys, all right? And safety. You know, the one thing about super slow is that it's safe. And if I'm dealing with someone that has an injury, this little FYI, injury or we have a range of motion, you know, there was a surgery and we have range of motion issues, I will use very slow protocols. In fact, I will do isometrics first, where we just static hold. And then depending on what we're dealing with, and then graduate into slow dynamic repetitions. So I certainly think there's a place for slower repetition speeds. Do I think it's the best thing for bodybuilders and muscle growth? I don't. But again, on the flip side, right, going fast is very silly because it offloads the muscles. It's harmful to the joints. So we have to kind of blend the two. Let's meet in the middle, guys. Let's go in the middle, right? Let's get a little centric here. Why are we getting crazy over here on the left side and the right side? Literally, come on, guys. Like, let's come back to the middle here. Like, let's not be so extreme with that, right? So you don't need to go super slow, but dear God, don't CrossFit your reps either, okay? Like, that's silly. So we come to the middle and we're not going too slow, we're not going too fast. We're somewhere in the middle. Getting close to muscle, so we're doing that per repetition, right? So we have high effort per rep. Now, getting close to muscular failure is also important. And doing both of these things gives us the opportunity to recruit as much muscle as we can for the task that we're doing. So one goal is fiber recruitment. And this is based on demand. And this is based on Henneman's size principle. So here is a real basic graph of motor unit recruitment. So we have required force down here, which goes this way. Then we have small motor units. And we have large motor units. So greater force will recruit larger motor units. So the size principle means your biggest muscle fibers will get recruited when it needs them. So force production must be high, okay? So this is why effort per repetition matters, but also training close to muscular failure. It's based on demand, right? So each repetition, there's a demand with what you're recruiting, right? So we can recruit as much as we can without being ballistic. We can recruit as much as we can, so we have high force production per repetition, and then we get close to muscular failure, which also does the same thing because there's a greater demand. Also, another reason getting close to failure, why it's important, is because it forces your body to slow more than it already is. So this allows individual muscle fibers to experience higher tension. So in a super slow protocol, they will start out restricting speed and then get to failure. So they get some of the benefit if they go to true failure, right? The guys who go ballistic typically don't go to failure. They'll get some of the benefit by having high effort per repetition because they're just slamming the weight fast, right? So again, I don't think that's the right way to do it either. We have to go somewhere in the middle and then get close to muscular failure. It's kind of the best of both worlds. Yo, quick pause on the video here. I want you to check out all of these natty transformations, drug-free. Listen, bro, I don't play that steroid game. I don't play that peptide game because it's stupid. So look, if you're looking for some natural muscle growth, I want you to check out my school community. There's a link in the description. Click it. Let's get you those drug-free gains the healthy way. Let's go, bro. And getting close to failure, again, we know that individual fibers have higher tensions. And we know this to be true because of the force velocity curve, okay? Now this, let me draw it real quick. And it looks somewhat, this curve is like this. Now, this states that forces are greater on fibers when velocity is slower and vice versa. So basically, when you get close to muscular failure, your repetition bar speed or contraction velocity, shall we say, it naturally slows down, and that's a good thing. It's what we want. Slower reps ensure the muscle fibers that are contracting experience greater forces. This translates to greater internal tension. Remember, mechanical tension. That translates into greater internal mechanical tension. That's a key hypertrophic stimulus. So high effort per repetition and getting close to muscle failure is important for two reasons. Motor unit recruitment, we want this because it recruits as many fibers as possible. And then high fiber tension. This allows fibers to experience maximal mechanical stress. So really it is high effort per repetition plus proximal failure. This is really important for gains, for muscular development. Now, I don't think you need to go to muscular failure on every single set. Some of them, sure, hit failure on some of them, but there's issues with going to failure on every single set, which I will cover in a different video. Okay, so we have problem number 3. Again, bear with me here as I do some much needed erasing. High volume. I see naturals doing this all the time. They replicate enhanced lifter programs that burn them out, and they do way too much volume. So, what's the solution? I bet you know. I bet you know. Low to moderate volume. That is the solution. I know it's kind of jumbled here. Listen guys, more volume isn't always better, but we do need enough sets to stimulate a response from training. So the goal is to find that effective dose for you, okay? Now you need to perform enough high effort sets that cross the threshold required to spark adaptation. But you must recover from that workload, otherwise you won't be able to keep progressing with heavier loads over time. And as mentioned already, a lot of naturals suffer because they typically follow the advice that they see from the NPC, IFBB people online. And some of you guys adorate these people. You worship them. You are just fanatics, even though you're natural. Makes no sense to me. I don't get it. You know, it's a whole drug abusing culture, and I'm not down with that. I ain't down with the drug abuse. Nothing. No booze, no drugs, no peds, like none of that. I don't smoke, I don't drink. It's all stupid, right? So if you're natty, like, what are you doing, guys? What are you doing? Stop revering those people. It's a little weird. Anyhow, the more is better paradigm, it has indoctrinated many lifters thanks to the drug culture of bodybuilding. And because of these drug fluencers, that is what most naturals copy. But this needs to be put into context. Every individual has a threshold of diminishing returns. This means that there's a point where increasing volume yields little to no additional muscle growth. In fact, surpassing this limit can become counterproductive, and it might hinder progression if you overdo it. So this means that there will be a point where your volume, it basically turns into what we call junk volume. So junk volume is defined as additional sets that net you no or very little benefit. The reality is naturals are wasting time on junk volume. Now, we do need a sufficient amount of volume to drive muscle growth, but without tapping into recovery resources into the next workouts. So if you keep getting stronger, as you should attempt to, and you keep intensity high effort, as you should, then you need to be careful with how much volume you do. And remember, you can either train hard or long, but not both. So if volume goes up, your intensity of effort goes down. And those sets will end up being non-productive, which is basically considered junk volume. Now, progressive load and intensity is the focus. And once we dial that in, we sprinkle on volume as needed. So here's a little fun fact for the day, a little FF, if you will. I love FFs. So intensity is more important for building muscle than volume is. If your effort isn't high enough, no amount of volume is going to matter. So this means you must surpass an intensity threshold for any amount of volume to have an impact on muscle growth, guys. This is the reason why intensity will always trump volume. Always. Without a certain degree of intensity, how much volume, how many sets you do, it will not matter. But we need a certain amount of volume. Yes. And as a natural, you need to be careful about how many sets you do per session because your recovery ability is more limited than someone who is taking exogenous sources of growth drugs. But if you're natural, junk volume is going to kill your gains. So I think the sweet spot for volume per muscle per session. Now, I know it's common to look at volume on a per weekly basis, and I've even talked about this in other videos, and I even gave this recommendation in my paper. But I've been thinking about this a lot, and my views are changing on this. I think we need to look at set volume on a per muscle, per session to session basis, not a weekly basis. And I know some of you are going to be like, oh, well, now you're just advocating high volume. That's just that's your workaround for advocating high volume. No, not what I'm saying. Because the frequency per muscle group can get pushed out, right? It could be every third day, could be every fifth, could be every seventh. There's variables around that, right? So I think the best solution is to find the set volume where you are still getting stronger, still pushing hard for each set, but use the amount needed to stimulate and maximize growth for that specific muscle group. And then we assess when that muscle group needs to be stimulated again. Each muscle group should still be in the low to moderate range for most naturals, so 5 to 10 sets. But we look at it on a session to session basis. So for example, you might need 6 sets for the shoulders on every third day, or maybe every fourth day. But we choose the optimal set volume for the muscle group and then look at when the muscle recovers based on that volume, not a weekly schedule. But this is based on your ability to recover and adapt, which is predicated on a lot of factors. But I think this is a better way to look at it, to look at volume. I think it should be looked at on a session-to-session basis, and then when do you recover to stimulate that muscle again. I've never heard of looking at volume on a session-to-session basis rather than weekly. All the research is, optimal weekly volume this, weekly volume that. So I've never seen anybody talk about what's optimal session volume for a muscle group for you. But that's just kind of where my brain's at lately, what I've been thinking. And I'll probably make a video on this because I think this is kind of a nuanced topic. So those are the 3 mistakes that I see naturals doing and why they're having a hard time growing. This excludes guys who respond to higher volume. I know some people do, Every video I get some cock muffins in the comments saying how they grow on high volume and they're natural. I'm so happy for you, bro. I'm so happy for you. You do you. I love it. But hey, listen, dog, this video is not for you, right? It's for the guys who have a hard time growing. Maybe they're doing high volume. I was that guy. I hit a limit. I was doing the bodybuilding routines. It wasn't working, okay? So if you're natural, if you're younger, if you're older, doesn't matter. If you're not seeing the results that you want, then try this. Go through these 3 steps and readjust. Focus on getting stronger. Track it. Don't get sloppy. Push yourself close to muscular failure with high effort reps, preceding reps up to proximal failure, and regulate volume and frequency. This is what I do with my clients, guys, okay? This is what I do with them. This is how I get the results with them without using the bodybuilding dope.